communication. How does one share information? Assuming for a moment that I have some information that I believe will be useful to you, what is the way in which I can share it so that whatever I communicate is heard, listened to, absorbed, and becomes useful enough to act on? Now, communication, as you know, has several aspects. There is verbal communication, there is written communication, uh, even silence is communication. Some of the most important communication episodes in human history have been silence more than speech. But let me start with spoken communications. So I've been reflecting on this for some time based on my own experiences, based on what I've heard, what I've seen, and what I am in a position to share with you. There are many of us who communicate or believe they communicate in the expectation that those that are hearing them are on the same page, have the same interest in the subject that is discussed, and are in a position to absorb whatever is said. That's not always true. Very often, you're speaking at people rather than speaking with people. I must share this that in these days, I use the expression, I talked to so and so, and then a younger colleague of mine corrected me by saying that why don't we say we speak with so and so so that we make the other person an equal partner in that exercise of communication. So the first lesson that I learned was that because you believe you have something to say, you are not in a position of superiority. You are not in a position of exclusive ownership of that information that you are reluctantly passing on. And sometimes, in the guise of passing on information, you so complicate the message that more often than not, the other person does not get what you're saying. That defeats the purpose of communication. Maybe that's what some people intend, but that's not what I think you and I should be doing. So what is communication? Coming back to the subject again. Communication is passing on a message that the receiver receives in exactly the same manner as the sender of that message intended it to be received. There should be no distortions in the message. There should be no disruptions in the thought process that impact communication. And therefore, I think it's important to decide what constitutes the important foundations of communication. The first is to recognize, as I've already said, that the person with whom you are communicating is on the same page and is in a position to receive your message with complete clarity and in its entirety. For this, language should be used not to conceal my thoughts, but to express my thoughts. And I say this because even though it's obvious, a number of people use language to conceal their thoughts and not to express it. How does that play out? You speak very fast so that the other person is unable to keep pace. You speak in sentences that don't seem to end, so the other person has lost track of what you're saying somewhere along the way. You use words which are not in common parlance, so that the other person is inclined to say, now what is this person saying? And perhaps to look at Google to figure out the meaning, while your train of communication is already traveling at a fast pace. That's not good enough. That doesn't help communication. And in history, we have any number of instances of people who thought they communicated when the message was not what they intended to be received. So I think it's important to decide when to communicate, what to communicate, whom to communicate with, what is the manner in which communication should take place, and also to do some kind of reflection on whether I have communicated what I intended to communicate. That's so far as spoken communication goes. And we'll always find that those that believe that they're very articulate, speak very well, that's their belief. It might not be a belief shared by the rest of mankind. But those that believe that they are top notch in this business are completely lost. And you hear the expression always, it went completely over my head. So, and this is without ducking, as people do in cricket matches. When you get the bouncer aimed at you, you duck. Here you don't duck, you sit erect and still the message goes straight above your head. That is not communication. Now, if you come to written communication, matters get even more complicated. One is that many people believe that using complex sentences is a manifestation of their control over the language. Fair enough, it might be that they exhibit excellent control. Is that helpful in the cause of communicating what you intend to communicate? There are sentences which begin and then don't seem to end, and somewhere along the way you get lost. There was one judge in the Supreme Court some years ago of whom it was said that his average sentence used to be 140 or 150 words. Now, mind you, this was laying down the law. Now, if the law is to be laid down in such long sentences, the entire object of communicating with those that need to understand the law would be completely lost. That is one. The second is to, as I mentioned a little earlier, use words which have the effect of demonstrating to the other party that I know these words. Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's not even in your passive vocabulary, forget your active vocabulary, but this is for me bread and butter. I use it all the time. There are people that do it. The third is the impact that the way language is spoken outside of India has on the way it is spoken in India. Expressions that are not common in India, the use of words that have different kinds of meanings as understood elsewhere and in the Indian context, all of these can cause a lot of problems. And there are persons that make it their specialization to write long sentences which might be correct, which might be complete, but which might confuse and which might confound. That's not the purpose of communication. So I urge you that when you seek to communicate, and this is very important because this is the age of communication. If ever there was an age, this is the age of communication. This is not the age in which you can live alone like the monarch who did not want to entertain anyone, leave alone people speaking with him. That kind of situation doesn't exist today. You are in a context in which you have to share information. You have to receive, you have to transmit. That process of sharing is premised on communication that is clear, communication that's correct, communication that's comprehensive. I urge you to work on this. I urge you to reflect on this. I will continue my journey of reflection whenever I see people communicating, when I communicate myself, so that tomorrow my communication becomes better than it is today. Tomorrow, hopefully, other people's communication will also be better than it is today. I wish you good luck and Godspeed.